Hey guys, this is Jamie. So, Happy New Year to everyone. I mean, if you're watching this further down the year, it's still a new year, so congrats. So, today I wanted to talk more about politics, and specifically today's topic was brought to you by me looking at our communist memes. And it was specifically a poll about, it was factually more information than a usual meme. And it was a recent study which was done of public opinion in Ukraine. It's quite recent, basically. But the point is, um, obviously, the public opinion of homosexuality in Ukraine hasn't changed much. And this is something that I wanted to discuss. So, I come from my ancestors are Eastern Ukrainians, right? So I kind of got a very, very sort of deep reality check when I was coming out to my relatives. Like, obviously, I have the family I have left, which I talk to, which I love, and obviously, I have a certain part that I do not talk to. And I feel like when it comes to other countries, I would say Ukraine and Lithuania have the most sort of backwards thinking that I've seen, and I've lived in a lot of different countries. Also, my partner's Brazilian, so I would say that I was absolutely not surprised by the poll, and specifically because I had people from my family who fled when the war started, and obviously hearing them talk about certain things or the way they reacted in the past, like, it gives me absolutely no surprise. And this is where I found it really interesting, because then people started discussing, obviously, when you mention Ukraine, you start mentioning the war happening right now. And people were saying, yeah, well, but in Russia it isn't better. And obviously, there was a recent new law introduced into Russia which bans even further, how to put this, restriction on promotion on everything LGBT. So, for any age, everything is strictly prohibited. And obviously, right now, in the time of war, people are already fleeing, and I would say that before the introduction of this law, it wasn't that great, but I did talk to different people. I hooked up with a few Russians who were abroad traveling to Portugal, and I do understand that it's a relatively small sample of the people of Russian people who I talked to. But I do want to really say that when I would tell them the struggles I faced, they would be shocked. And even, like, for instance, I have been stopped by the police in Lithuania for just looking the way I am. And I had troubles growing up because I spoke Russian in Lithuania. So obviously, it was interesting, and it was a cultural shock to me to hear that they had far more rights in Russia back in the day before the war than what I had in Lithuania or when I'd visit relatives in Ukraine. So I found that very interesting. And I have spoken about it in, like, much earlier videos of mine. And so obviously, going back to the war, I wanted to say that not a lot of people, and this is somewhere where I talked to my partner about it, and we sort of really dove into it. And I really kind of saw the comparison. I understand that not everyone and who supports Ukraine in the war thinks that they are freeing Ukraine from the shackles of homophobic and transphobic Russia. But I still see, obviously, in the LGBT community, people saying, like, we should do this. against Russia because they are homophobic, they are transphobic. But the thing is, so is Ukraine. And someone brought up a good point saying that they were both under the Soviet regime, which was highly, highly homophobic, and like, obviously, as time passes, there have been a few articles here and there when it comes to trans people getting surgeries in Soviet times, and were discussions in medical circles about transsexuality and stuff like that. But even then, it's very minuscule, and trans was still a taboo to talk about, or to even think about, or to even know about. But I feel like we also need to dig into, and I spoke a lot about Ukraine's current sort of situation about LGBT and how there's neo-Nazi gay people in the Azov battalion, which was very surprising in my previous video. I mean, it made sense, but it was... just go watch the video. So basically, I found that really interesting. And then quite a while back, I was actually watching an interview of Tony Blair, and I got really surprised that he was talking about the operation in Iraq, and he said that he would do the same thing he did in Iraq, but he'd do the same thing in Ukraine, meaning he would not do a proxy war. He would specifically send troops to Ukraine to fix everything and to put everything in its rightful place. Meaning, he was using the sort of same tactics, which this is where I found it very interesting between me and my partner. My partner is Brazilian. I lived in Europe during the whole Iraq crisis, and I lived in the UK for a bit. My family were kind of very into New Labour and etc., and they still are, sort of like reminiscing of the Tony Blair days, because it was a different time for immigration in the UK, and obviously if we close our eyes on Tony Blair's war criminal side, we have to acknowledge that people were far more welcome during his era of Britain when it came to immigrants from Europe and etc. But Tony Blair is a different discussion. I want to focus specifically on that interview. And basically, then that got me thinking even further that if you look at different politicians, like, obviously, again, I really have to emphasize that this war that we're having right now between Russia and Ukraine, obviously the active parties of it are Ukraine and Russia, but obviously Ukraine gets support from abroad, and it is a proxy war when it comes to, for instance, people, the support from the US, the support from the UK, which the support from the European Union and other countries which support Ukraine. So I find it difficult when I see that people think that Zelensky and his Nazi crew, for some ungodly reason, will be supporting a sort of LGBT positive world or an LGBT positive country in Ukraine. And I truly do not know who will win. And frankly, both outcomes terrify me, because, I mean, this is where, like, it's a massive rabbit hole, like, to even just explain the whole politics behind Zelensky and everything that has been happening in Donbass, like, starting with Poroshenko and the previous president, and all the blood that lies in Putin's hands, also since the whole Donbass war started there. And people... this is where I am very grateful that a lot of people I've seen on RedTube or overall in general on YouTube, I am very happy to see that people really raise awareness to provide who is the Azov battalion, who is the Ukrainian army, obviously, where the big part of is, where their ideology lies. And also I was thinking about, while I was thinking about this video, I remembered in general, like a lot of people who were kind of like pro-Zelensky or against Zelensky, like in Ukraine, there was this whole thing that if they join Europe, or if we join Europe, we'd be in Europa, which was, looking back, probably a slur. And I remember even Zelensky back in his acting days had some sketches around that, which would be like, we would join Europe, and then we would praise Hitler and be gay. I really remember that very vividly. So yeah. And obviously, the whole situation just stresses me out to no end. But at the same time, I just feel like people need to be aware that there are parallels. There have been, like, for instance, I talked about Tony Blair and his whole idea that it shouldn't be a proxy war, it should be an actual war. And if we look at politicians, we also need to look back at their history. Like, Hillary Clinton didn't support gay marriage. Zelensky didn't support LGBT rights, like, ever. So why would he change now, and specifically with the current Nazi ideology he's associated with? So obviously, I feel like we need to take account history, not just on a broad scale, but in a personal scale. Like, has this person supported LGBT rights before? Has this person spoken about it before? And I know that in this case, I'm sort of really trying to pick small bits and pieces and try to make them fit together. But basically what I'm trying to say is that both sides are fucked up. Both sides will not help LGBT people. And obviously, even the argument of helping Ukrainian LGBT people isn't something that is widely discussed. So I believe I may have made this comparison before, but it's like the scene in Schindler's List when the Jews get released from a concentration camp, and they're told that you go to the red side, you won't survive, you'll go to the US side, even worse, or you might also not survive. But the point is that they didn't have anywhere to go, and the same situation is for LGBT people right now in Ukraine. And right now, I've seen those photos on my feed in different websites where I see that there are LGBT parades, but keep in mind, they're not supported by the government. They won't be supported in a Nazi ideology-esque thinking government. So that is not a reason to support Ukraine. And then you're gonna be like, well, Jamie, what do I do? Who do I support? No one. This is fucked up. This is war. I don't even understand this whole idea that we should be supporting someone. We should just be against war de facto. And it really pains me when I see relatives taking one side or the other side, and nothing's good's gonna come out of it. It's war. And I still don't understand. Like, I remember, again, one of the best arguments I've ever read was that back in the days, the left side, or like Democrats, would fight against the war. They wouldn't want war at all. And right now, people advocate for war. People want some side to win. This isn't about that. War shouldn't be happening in this day and age. War shouldn't be happening at all. And that is my stance. Should Russia have invaded Ukraine? Absolutely fucking not. Absolutely not. It's insane. It's awful. It's a tragedy. It's just like, there's a very good Russian singer which I admire, and I don't think she's well known out of Russian circles, and she has a really great song. If you want to check it, it's Zemfira, and she did a few concerts, and she also released a song. And every time she talks about the war in Ukraine and herself being Russian, she herself admitted that she counts the days of since when the war passed, since Russia attacked Ukraine. And I just can't help but get emotional every time, like, I listen to that certain song and she asks that I will probably be searching for the answer of why this war happened and why did my country invade until I die. And that is beyond fucked up. So yeah, I just wanted to say that I truly think we should support the end of war rather than support escalation, or, like Tony Blair suggested, sending troops in or whatever the fuck else. So yeah, thank you very much for watching. I'm sorry if this video was a bit all over the place and if you heard my dog. I just really hope you enjoyed it. I enjoy touching on such spicy political topics. I may be a trans YouTuber, but I really enjoy talking about politics. And if you like this video, please give me a thumbs up. Feel free to comment. And if you liked this video and this kind of videos, you want more of them, you want to just subscribe, I would really appreciate it. Thank you very much.